Yes.
Let's talk about both reasons, first of all, just in a little more detail to set the scene. Donald Trump's been impeached twice. Karoun, the first time was for what?
The first time was for obstruction of Congress and abuses of power that were related to his involvement in trying to influence Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and doing that over the various doing that basically to start to start investigations of Joe Biden in order to get the military aid that Congress had already promised to send to Ukraine. It was a preview episode basically that has implications for what we're seeing right now, even playing out there.
Yeah, he spoke to Volodymyr Zelensky, didn't he? And all that came up. And then the second insurrection, as we said, Karoun, was the second insurrection, the second impeachment, rather, was because of the insurrection on January the 6th, the Capitol riots. Now, as I understand it, Rachel, you began writing the book after the first impeachment. That was enough for you to raise some serious questions about the manner in which that impeachment had been conducted.
That's right. I mean, after the first impeachment, we saw Donald Trump's poll numbers reach the highest they had ever been. And we were hearing from Democrats, a lot of our sources who worked on these impeachments, Democratic sources, that they basically botched this. There was Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who obviously oversaw the strategy for these impeachments as the highest ranking Democrat in the House. She was always very afraid of impeachment. She worried that it would be sort of a political boomerang that would come back and hurt their party and potentially cost them their majority. So when she was pushed into an impeachment, she only embraced it half-heartedly, and that meant putting the investigation on a very quick timeline, only 2 weeks of public hearings, not going after firsthand witnesses in Trump's inner circle to try to make that testimony to the American public, and having it all done by Christmas, which if you do comparisons to past presidential impeachments, everybody sort of looks at Nixon's as the gold standard because it actually worked. It got him out of the White House. They didn't even have to impeach him. And that takes a lot of time in terms of fact finding. It takes fighting in courts to try to get your subpoenas upheld. And with Nixon, they did that over the course of well over a year. But because Pelosi was afraid of impeachment and the political blowback, she didn't want to take the time to build the fuller case. And so our book very much looks at not only Republican hypocrisy when it comes to Donald Trump, but also what Democrats did in terms of pulling their punches.
And that's incredible, really, from Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, who was very outspoken against Donald Trump. She was no friend of his, was she, Karoun?
No, she was not. She thought that he was a threat to the system. But the problem was that it's very difficult to impeach and to do so unscathed. In the history of American presidential impeachments, as Rachel pointed out, Nixon is the high watermark. But we have the episode of the Clinton impeachment in the late 1990s when, frankly, Nancy Pelosi came of age as a lawmaker. And that didn't go so well for the Republican Party that tried to impeach him. And so there's been this deep-seated sense that she has had for a long time that impeachment can blow back on the impeacher if perfect. And so Nancy Pelosi is a political tactician. She's excellent at it, but she is much more that than she is a constitutional lawyer. And the problem is, though, when you pursue an impeachment and you're doing it trying to stay within a political framework and stay politically safe and protect your party, you end up, as Rachel pointed out, pulling punches, cutting corners, so that you don't have to take the potential blowback if you want to go all the way and do it as potentially a constitutional lawyer would.
Yeah.
But as a result, in these cases, the impeachments ended up becoming weaker as a tool to check a president in the future, and also didn't ultimately end up restraining Trump. He is just as strong as he ever was, even though he's not in office anymore. He is significantly influential. We talk about him to this day, though it's been almost 2 years since he left office.
Yeah, well, he could run again for president, of course. And Rachel, tell me what else you uncovered. So one big factor, as we've discussed, is Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her nervousness behind the scenes, really, her tiptoeing around these impeachments, not how she portrayed herself in public at all. What else did you uncover?
Well, we could talk about some of the Republican hypocrisy we saw. We learned about several episodes after January 6th where Republican leaders were just as concerned about what Trump was doing as the Democratic leaders. We have in one of our chapters a very detailed TikTok about what was happening on January 6th when the leaders of Congress were evacuated from the riot and taken to a military base about an hour away from the campus of the Capitol. And basically, they joined together to save the Capitol because they knew Pence would not, or I'm sorry, they knew Trump would not. They ended up calling Vice President Mike Pence and asking him to give an order that they weren't even sure he had the authority to give when he commanded the National Guard to move quickly to save the Capitol. But just as quickly as they came together, and Karoun and I write that it was the only time in Trump's presidency where we saw all four leaders united to try to bring Trump to heel. That quickly fell apart within, a couple of hours or a couple of days. I mean, you saw Mitch McConnell, who was the GOP leader in the Senate. He took this sort of what he called an off-ramp where he said publicly that you can't impeach a former president, that was unconstitutional. And reporting we have in our book indicates that he actually didn't even believe that reason. He just gave it because he wasn't willing to take the political risk of voting to convict Trump, which would have meant he had to retire because Republicans wouldn't stand for it. So there's that. And then with Kevin McCarthy, who is probably going to be the next Speaker of the House, given that Republicans here in the United States are likely to take that chamber this election. We have examples where he was sort of struggling between his own conscience and his dreams of being speaker and his knowledge that he needed to keep Donald Trump close, even though Trump had done something very terrible. And so we show a lot of his own sort of internal grappling, but ultimately politics wins out and he goes for his future ambition.
It does paint both of those impeachments as being, part of a political game, really. And as you say, you've uncovered testimony, more evidence that wasn't included in some of those impeachments. And Karoun, finally, briefly, if you don't mind, you two have faced a lot of backlash, haven't you, as journalists for wanting to uncover this story?
We have. Look, I mean, we are telling you, based on what we've done, extensive reporting, meticulous fact checking, going back to all of our sources, we have uncovered a story that challenges what the narrative has been. And in the United States, we are in a very partisan time where people are very, very angry at the opposite side, very, very defensive of the heroes they see. And they see any questioning and any criticism or any scrutiny as an affront to the way they think that things should be. The problem is history doesn't work in black and white. And as much as we are talking about systems and institutions and impeachments, we are also talking about the people, the very flawed people and humans who carried them out, who were scared of some things, who were not completely confident, who had other objectives that they were trying to pursue at the same time. All of this becomes a story of, like almost a Shakespearean drama at times, frankly, in terms of people with good intentions not doing everything they could to back them up and not succeeding. And at the end of the day, we're not trying to, we don't take sides in this book at all. But at the end of the day, we are laying out what happened because we think it's important to study that history. And we think it's especially important to study that recent history because it may repeat itself, and it may repeat itself in ever more political ways that chip away at the system, especially if we end up with the situation Rachel just predicted, where the likely Republicans will take the House, and they have already said they plan to use that perch to impeach Biden and several members of his cabinet.